Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing my best books of 2019. I did manage to narrow it down to 5, and honestly it was surprisingly easy. I read a lot of good books, a lot of 5-star books, but it was more of a objectively 5-star and I really enjoyed them rather than a punch in the gut kind of great. These 5, a couple of them definitely hit the punch in the gut kind of great. I think 1 or 2 of them were more of a love tap to the gut kind of great, which is fine because, like I said, I read a lot of good books this year and these are just my top 5. That said, let's get started. These are in no particular order because I never rank my books more than choosing the top however many. That's just way too much mental effort to try to figure out exactly which book I liked the most. First one is How to Behave Badly in Elizabethan England by Ruth Goodman. If you did not know that this was coming, welcome. I'm obsessed with Elizabeth I, so this obviously had to end up on this list. I love Ruth Goodman's writing. It is accessible, it is fun, and there's definitely some personality shining through her writing, which is great. This book is nonfiction and it is basically exactly what it says on the cover. How to Behave Badly, a guide for knaves, fools, harlots, cuckolds, drunkards, liars, thieves, and braggarts. This was so perfect. It talks about how to swear based on your class, based on your gender, all of that fun stuff. It talks about how to fight. It talks about how to eat. It talks about just all of that stuff. And more specifically, because it's how to behave badly, it's all of this stuff in the sense of insulting somebody else. Calling a man by some sort of traditionally feminine epithet was extraordinarily insulting because, you know, that's what we do. But then she explained how to insult a woman and the differences between them. She didn't just explain, well, here's how you insult a man and here's how you insult a woman, or here's how to fight a duel or whatever and why they're bad. And she explains the societal expectations behind them and why they're bad, which is amazing, especially because this is 400 or 500 years ago, and so trying to explain to somebody why a certain word is bad when we don't think of it even as a word anymore, let alone bad, is extraordinarily helpful. Otherwise you have no idea what the context is, but Ruth Goodman does a great job of explaining the context. This was just a fun, rollicking read that I would very much like to read again in the next couple of years and try and remember more of it because it was just hilarious. For example, she has the feminine fight right here, and it says that it focused upon hair and headgear because when you were a virgin or unmarried, you wore your hair loose and unbound on your shoulders, which is part of why Elizabeth's pictures so prominently display her red hair. Look, there's more to that, but for simplicity's sake, that's part of why. Whereas men, there's no societal expectation for them not to have had sex by the time they're 15. Which seems awfully young to me, but that's a whole other thing. And like I said, I really liked that she explained the context as well as the actual specifics of the insults and the fights. Next I have Earth by David Brin, and I did do a full review on this that I will link down below, so I won't go into too much detail, but this is a science fiction book set in 2040. It was written in 1990, and it is scarily accurate. In this book, global warming has taken over the world. There are people who live on floating trash barges, basically, because, you know, there's a lot of water, and we've just got more because that's what happens to ice when it gets hot. Olaf. Anyway, and then he looks at how pollution would have affected the world in his time, and the eco-terrorists and the conservation people, and what they would have done as well. I did tab this book, so there's a lot of them, but it was definitely a very thought-provoking book, and like I said, it was scary because it is very close to accurate. Maybe not in the fact that we will be living on trash barges in 20 years, although I'm not ruling that out, but in the fact that pollution has had such an effect and taken such a toll on us and the native populations of the states. And if you want to hear more about extinct populations and that kind of stuff, go check out my review for Rise of the Necrofauna, which I think will be up by the time this one goes up. If not, either way, I'll link it down below when it goes up. This is just, it's a very well-written one. It is also in somewhat multi-format. It's not quite to the level of Illuminae, which is the other science fiction that I know is multi-format, but it does switch between a whole cast of characters, and it does include pictures like this and graphs at various other points. The cast of characters is fantastic. There's so many of them. It is a little bit hard to keep track of them at first, but then you catch on pretty quickly, and to see each of them interact is amazing. The next two I'm kind of cheating with because they include entire series, but the first one is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I adore this series, and again, if you haven't seen P.R. Ford's adaptation, go watch it. Link down below, because it is just one of the top 5 things since sliced bread. The other one being the internet, to name. But, I mean, still, top 5 things since sliced bread, guys. Her adaptation. This is the ultimate revenge story about a girl named Mia who saw her family killed and decides to become an assassin to take revenge upon the men who killed her family. It is amazing. It is sexy and gory and heartfelt, all without being heartfelt or feeling-y at all. I love it. There is amazing world building in these books. So many footnotes, so many footnotes. The stories, the books each wrap up well on their own, and then the overall theme or plot rather comes into being in the third book more clearly, or clearly at all. And I love that he was able to do that, because I think that takes real talent, and it's not something I see in a lot of books, particularly fantasy. Again, this is just an amazing, amazing series, and while it may start off slow in the first 150 pages of Nevernight, it gets so much better, and it is amazing, or it would not be on this list. Then we have The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, or the trilogy rather, which is The Adventures of the Athena Club. This is a historical science fiction sort of series set in the late 1880s, early 1890s, because they helped solve the Whitechapel murders, and it follows the daughters of society's traditional monsters. Frankenstein, Dracula, Moreau, Jekyll and Hyde, all those guys. It also brings in Sherlock and Watson, which is fantastic, and then brings in so many other characters from literature of that time. Won't say any more than that, but I love this series. The first one, I think, does fall into the trap of being a setup book, but that said, it's a really fun, good setup book. They help Sherlock and Watson look into and investigate the Whitechapel murders. They meet each other, and it's a sort of new, innovative way of writing novels, which they also acknowledge in there. For example, one of the characters is writing, it's like a retrospective book, and so you have little comments from each of the characters in there throughout the pages that are just, depending on the character, some of them are really snarky, some of them are correcting things, some of them are calling out the author within the book, and it's perfect. I love it. I love the diversity of the characters, I love the number of the characters, I love the plot in this, I love that she brings in so many different societal expectations. For example, she's got suffrage, that's the word, suffragette is the noun. I mean, they're both nouns, not the point. She's got suffrage in here, she's got them traveling all over Europe. There's just so much, and I adore it. And last but not least is The Daughter of Molokai by Alan Brenner. This is the second in his Molokai series, the first of which I also loved, and I think it made my best books of 2018 list. This one follows one of the very minor characters from the first book. But our main character is Rachel, and she is set up for adoption in Hawaii and then ends up being adopted by a Japanese family who moves to California. It starts in the, I want to say 1920s and ends sometime in the 1980s, 90s maybe. And so it follows Rachel through the Japanese internment of World War II, and I love how Alan Brenner makes his characters come alive and shows the bad parts. I don't know quite how to explain this. I want to say he shows the bad parts through a rose-colored lens, but he doesn't. He doesn't make it seem like it's okay to have locked up thousands or millions of people for no reason at all. But he looks at it through a human lens. There we go. In that they recognize that this is not okay, that this is wrong, and it's awful because they're not living in sanitary conditions or good conditions of any sort. But they are human, and so they find hope, they find the bright part, and they help each other through it. There's obviously a lot more to this book than just the Japanese internment. They have some economic ups and downs, because if this starts in the 1920s, you got the whole Great Depression thing, which also isn't that great. And then there's the Cold War and a whole bunch of not nice stuff in the 20th century. But it goes through all of that, and it gives you a very personal look at living in the 20th century in California, specifically as somebody of color. I think he does a very good job of that. I also think he makes amazing settings, not just in choosing, oh, well, California in the 1920s and 30s, but in how he describes them without being Lord of the Rings-esque. And so I think he is definitely probably one of my favorite authors just because of how he puts these stories into perspective. Alright, those are my 5 best books of 2019. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have anything to say about them, you've read them, want to read them, whatever, let me know down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!